Shohei Ohtani is closing in on his return to the mound, and the timing could not be more important for the Los Angeles Dodgers or for the National League MVP race. Ohtani last started a game as a pitcher on July 3, going 8-2 with a 1.79 ERA across 14 starts before left knee inflammation, along with some discomfort in his throwing side biceps, forced him out of the rotation. Since then he has continued to play as the designated hitter, and his bat has barely missed a beat. Manager Dave Roberts said that if it were entirely up to Ohtani, he would already be back on a mound. Over the past week, Ohtani has moved through the final stages of a throwing progression. He threw a simulated session firing dozens of pitches across multiple innings, then followed that by facing live hitters in a session against fellow rehabbing catcher Will Smith. Roberts has indicated that Ohtani could realistically return to game action as a pitcher within days, with a start in Detroit floated as one possibility depending on how his arm and knee respond. For the Dodgers, getting Ohtani back on the mound is less about needing another arm and more about the extra value he provides. Because of his two-way designation, Ohtani doesn't count against the standard pitcher limit on the active roster, so any innings he can give the team function as a bonus without costing them a bullpen spot. That flexibility becomes especially useful as the season moves toward its stretch run and the Dodgers look to set up their strongest possible group for October. Ohtani's own numbers this season remain remarkable even with the pitching layoff factored in. As a hitter, he is batting .288 with a .389 on-base percentage, a .934 to .935 OPS, 30 home runs and 80 RBIs. Before the knee issue shut him down, his pitching was arguably even more impressive than his hitting. Across those first 14 starts he posted an 8-2 record with a 1.79 ERA over 85 2/3 innings, adding 95 strikeouts, a 0.95 whip and a 2.60 FIP. His ERA through his first 8 starts of the year, just 0.73, ranked among the lowest in the live ball era for any starting pitcher. The Dodgers pitching staff has also been reshaped since the trade deadline. Los Angeles has continued to lean on Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, and newly acquired arms as it manages workload across the rotation, with Roki Sasaki and Chris Bubic also factoring into the mix. Bringing Ohtani back adds another dimension to that group, particularly heading into a stretch of the schedule where the Dodgers cannot afford to be short-handed. Meanwhile, the National League MVP race has tightened into what is now essentially a two-man competition between Ohtani and Chicago Cubs center fielder Pete Crow-Armstrong. In the most recent MLB.com poll of 37 experts, Crow-Armstrong overtook Ohtani for the first time all season, collecting 29 of the 37 first-place votes and 177 total points, compared to Ohtani's 8 first-place votes and 154 points. It marked a real shift in a race Ohtani had led for most of the year. Crow-Armstrong's case is built on an unusually complete season. Through his most recent games he is hitting .281 with 30 home runs, 78 RBIs, 89 runs scored and 31 stolen bases, putting him within reach of a second consecutive 30 home run, 30 stolen base season. Advanced metrics have him leading all of baseball in Fangraphs' version of wins above replacement, and he currently ranks first in the National League in several defensive and offensive value categories, including fielding run value and center field. Since Ohtani's absence from the mound began on July 3, Crow-Armstrong has been especially hot, posting a 171 WRC+ and a 1.014 OPS over that stretch while adding 14 home runs. Ohtani's case, by contrast, rests on the sheer uniqueness of doing damage in two disciplines at once. Even while limited to hitting for the past several weeks, his rate stats remain elite. A .935 OPS with 30 home runs and 80 RBIs, plus a career already built on being the only player in MLB history to record 50 home runs and 50 stolen bases in a single season, which he accomplished in 2024. If his pitching value is added back into the equation, his overall wins above replacement climbs into direct competition with Crow-Armstrong's, since evaluators note that even with only 85 2/3 innings on the mound, Ohtani's 1.79 ERA contributes real value on top of an already strong bat. That is precisely why his return to the rotation matters so much for the rest of the season, not just for the Dodgers' postseason positioning but for how voters will ultimately weigh the MVP race. A healthy Ohtani pitching down the stretch, even in a limited role, would restore the two-way argument that has carried him to the award in past seasons. Analysts covering the race have pointed out that Crow-Armstrong's rise coincided almost exactly with the stretch when Ohtani could not contribute anything from the mound, and that a return to form as a pitcher could shift the calculus back in Ohtani's favor. Roberts has been careful about how he frames the medical situation. He has said the plan is not to rush Ohtani's progression just to hit a specific date, but rather to make sure the team is heading in the right direction before adding intensity. Ohtani himself has echoed that patience publicly, saying it is improving day by day and that he would rather be sure the recovery is on the right track than push an artificial timeline. There is also a practical roster benefit tied to timing. September roster expansion allows teams to carry additional players, and the Dodgers view Ohtani's return as an opportunity to run a six-man rotation without leaving their bullpen short-handed, since his two-way status effectively gives them an extra arm without spending an extra roster spot. That matters heading into a stretch where health and pitching depth across the league is being tested, and it lines up with the type of workload management teams typically emphasize in the final weeks before October. None of this is happening in isolation from the rest of the standings. The Dodgers remain in a tight fight in the National League, and every game down the stretch carries postseason seeding implications. Recent series have shown just how thin the margins are at the top of the league, with Ohtani himself delivering big individual performances even without pitching, including multi-home run efforts. On the same night Ohtani went 4 for 5 with 2 home runs in Denver, Crow-Armstrong matched him with an identical stat line in Chicago, punctuating just how closely these two seasons continue to mirror one another. Where things go from here likely depends on two intertwined storylines. The first is straightforward: how Ohtani's knee and arm respond once he actually returns to a big league mound, and whether the Dodgers can build him back up gradually without another setback. The second is less predictable, tracking how voters weigh a return to two-way dominance against Crow-Armstrong's remarkably consistent, all-around season for a competitive Cubs club. If Ohtani does take the mound again in the coming days and picks up where he left off before the knee issue, even a handful of strong outings could be enough to swing the MVP conversation back in his direction, especially given how close the point totals already are. If Crow-Armstrong continues playing at his current level while Ohtani is still working his way back into pitching shape, the gap could instead widen further before the season is out. Either way, the next several weeks are shaping up to be pivotal, both for where the Dodgers land in the standings and for who ultimately walks away with the National League's biggest individual honor.